Hey guys, it's Chaz. On today's episode of Law Have Mercy, it's our first episode of season 3. Very excited to bring on our first viral guest, small business lawyer, Scott Guidry. We talk about medical marijuana. We talk about gun ownership. We talk about his viral video of Hooters. We talk about Uber and the gig economy. And we even discuss the top 3 king cakes in Acadiana. It's an awesome episode. Hope you enjoy. Hey, this is Chaz Roberts. I'm a personal injury lawyer. It's my passion to bring the law to the people, and that's the purpose of this podcast. You're listening to Law Have Mercy.
Dude, do you want to spice up?
You are listening to Law Have Mercy. Hey guys, Chaz here again with another season of Law Have Mercy. I cannot believe we made it to a 3rd season. We have a new and improved set. We have gone big on everything. We got brand new cameras. We got some accoutrement on the background. I don't know if that's the right way to say that word, but we got new paintings. We got new stuff, and I'm just so pumped. Thanks for everyone for continuing to support the show. It's going to be big, bad, better than ever. I got some amazing guests lined up. The guests keep on getting better and better and better, but I would be remiss to not to forget about my old friends, and I brought today one of our favorites, and I get a lot of feedback every time. Mr. Scott Guidry. What's up, Scott?
Thank you, man. Welcome. Thank you for bringing me back. It's I love the new studio. Since the last time I was sitting in that blue chair talking to you. Yeah.
Well, you were in the blue chair, and then you came to the table. Now we got actual stuff in the background.
Yeah,
right.
Some accoutrements, as you said.
Yeah, something like that. So what's interesting about Scott is Scott, you had the first. So we've had millions of views by now.
Oh,
right?
I saw. I follow the podcast myself.
Yeah. So we had. We just had a video that hit 1.6 million, but you were actually the first to go viral.
Yeah,
okay.
you texted me the other day and told me I got beat out. So
yeah, that was the first time someone beat you out. Now, we had a video that we were talking about Hooters, and we're talking about workplace discrimination.
Yeah, how do they get away with only having female servers?
Yeah. Carter, can you play that video? As a company, let's just say like Hooters. How does Hooters get around hiring only female waitresses?
Well, they actually got sued by a male who wanted to go work there. And mostly, I think he was just trying to prove a point, probably get a little settlement money too. And he won. But the thing is Hooters said, sure, come work, put on those shorts and that T-shirt and go walk around. And the guy didn't really want to do that.
How does a company... Okay, first question, Scott. Was your beard actually darker in that picture?
It was.
You got a few more grays?
I got some more grays. I got to wear some reading glasses. All kind of things that happen.
So, all right. Was it your brilliant insight, or was it just so many people Google Hooters per day? What do you think?
Oh, it was probably Hooters and the beautiful woman you put on the thumbnail instead of my face, man.
Good job to the marketing department. Yeah. All right. So... do you have any? Lots of people commented. Some of them were just crazy comments, but
I noticed somebody said, "Hey, they didn't actually win the trial, right?"
Right.
You know? And I was like, "Well, no, you're right." But I did say like they got a pretty big fair settlement. I mean, you as a trial attorney know most cases don't go to trial.
No, we love settling cases because if we settle cases, it puts more money in the client's pocket. There's less you have to spend on trial, less risk, quicker. You don't have to wait it out for a trial date and get continue. So I need to know, how much did this case settle for?
Right. And so this one, it was actually a group of guys back in 1997. So now we're talking, almost 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And they settled. So it wasn't one guy. I was wrong about that.
They made a class?
But it was just a group of them. But they ended up settling for $3.75 million. And they got Hooters to agree to try and hire more male servers.
Oh. Lath, can you run inflation numbers? We're going to come back to that in a second, but what's $3.7 million in 1997? I mean, a lot.
Dude, it's a lot.
It's a lot. That's when Subway was probably $1.50 for a sub, right? And
right.
You can't get out of there for under $20, right? Well, speaking of Hooters, kind of a crazy week with Hooters, right? I mean, we had a Hooters that's been open for it's worth $7 million now, by the way.
Wow.
That's good money.
Yeah.
So we had a Hooters that has been open for 25 years. I cannot count the times that I've been in that location, when I was a kid, right?
Right.
Eating 20 20-piece wings.
My mom used to bring me to Hooters all the time.
Yeah, they have good wings.
She used to bring me back T-shirts from Hooters when she went visit them.
So definitely was a staple in the Lafayette area for a long time.
Yeah.
I wasn't around when it first opened, right? I wasn't. My eyes weren't open to Hooters when it first opened 25 years ago.
Right.
But anyway, it's been a signature of the restaurant scene for 25 years. And what happened this week, Scott?
It got closed on January 1st. People came in to work. I mean, they literally, from what I read the article, some people were showing up to their shift and the door was locked. And there was a little sign saying, hey, we're closed. That's how they found out they no longer had a job.
All right. I actually had someone on TikTok that messaged me one time and asked me something very similar happened to her at her restaurant where she worked for 3 years. And she showed up to work one day and the door was locked. Okay. So her question was, is that illegal? Should restaurants give notice to the employees, the cooks, the waitresses, all the people that work there so they have enough time to find another job?
It can be illegal. That's the thing, right? We have laws, but we've talked about that before in the last podcast. Some of these laws only apply to companies of certain sizes.
Okay.
So the federal government tends to leave the smaller mom and pop. So if that was a real small mom and pop restaurant, I would doubt that they would have had to give them any kind of notice. But we do have a federal act that is called the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, which gets shortened to WARN, which is kind of funny because that's exactly what the law is about. You should warn your employees if you're going to lay them off.
Yeah, I'm always amazed that these federal laws, they always find a cool acronym. Right, that's very fitting. WARN, right? And so that's the duty to warn the employees that there's going to be a layoff period, right?
Yeah, and there's some minor rules in there because in the name you heard too that they have to provide some kind of retraining in certain circumstances. But it generally only applies to companies with 100 or more employees.
Is that the number, 100?
100.
Okay, so Hooters it's probably a franchise, right?
Yeah, so it's probably that particular restaurant is the only thing we're looking at. We're not looking at the entire Hooters across the world. So that one Hooters maybe didn't have 100 employees.
All right. What's your theory of why that Hooters shut down?
Well, you just said it yourself. When was the last time you went?
Been a long time.
Right. I think that's it. The culture's moved away from those kinds of restaurants to some extent.
Well, I've noticed that drinking patterns are different with millennials, right?
For sure.
I remember sitting down at a restaurant and drinking beer out of pitchers for 3 hours, watching the ball game, eating 20-piece wings, just getting fat and drunk, right? And that doesn't happen as much anymore.
I've noticed drinking habits with Gen Xers has changed. I mean, my own friends of my age don't drink nearly as much. I quit drinking 15 years ago. So.
Yeah, same here. I quit drinking 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So drinking patterns or eating patterns too, right?
Oh, diet, man. Diet. So many people are eating so much healthier now, myself included. And so eating some fried wings with a bunch of sauce on them might not fit everybody's diet these days, right? You can't eat a bunch of Hooters and run all those marathons.
No, I couldn't. Do you think that Twin Peaks affected it as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's some competition in our city that came in after Hooters for that same style of restaurant, right? Some people call them restaurants.
That's a good name. And I think because Hooters is such an old franchise, right, it may be located in certain areas that are not as desirable as the city grows.
Yeah.
And they're not putting a new franchise on the new side.
No, we didn't have one because they were already struggling with the one they had.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that.
It's definitely interesting. I can tell you the one in Katy, Texas is very robust. And part of that is we play golf, right, at 7 a.m. and then go there at 10:30.
Right.
And then my uncle walks in and he's like the mayor of town. And, they just all love him. And he buys everything for everyone in the entire restaurant. And, it's not as it has nothing to do with like the objectification, right? It's really changed to be just a nice social place that you can go and have a couple beers and watch the game and eat some cheap food. Right?
And our restaurant was 25 years old and it hadn't been updated a lot. So, probably maybe some newer Hooters or more bigger TVs, all those things that people are looking for when they go out. Cause it's, usually social time.
Yeah. Another question that I want to get to, Scott, is that things are coming up in the workplace about marijuana, right? And so you have a trend overall through the country of legalization of marijuana, right?
Yes.
So do you know how many states are legalized, or at least you can get it with a prescription?
If you can, just getting medical marijuana, you're only got 6 states that have completely banned marijuana at all.
Okay.
Which is, so, I mean,
Are those like just super conservative states?
It's Idaho, Kansas, it's Nebraska, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Wyoming. So typically,
Just an outright ban?
Outright ban. You can't have any kind of medical. There's about 7 states that allow medical, but it's only CBD oil. So once again, we're not really talking about those psychoactive substances like the THC. Those are Georgia, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Tennessee, Texas, and Wisconsin.
Oh,
so again, you're looking at
thank you for the graphics, sir.
So again, you're looking at some states that are more conservative. But when you get to medical, I mean, we're talking about 37 states that allow for medical marijuana with THC in it. So a lot of the country has access to some sort of medical marijuana.
So the question then becomes, someone gets a medical card or can legally buy marijuana, all right? They have it in their system. They go to their workplace. They get a random drug test. They fail the drug test. They're terminated. The question becomes, I'm taking that for my glaucoma. I'm taking it for my sleeplessness. I'm taking it for whatever medical condition that they used to obtain, that they used to purchase the marijuana or whatever, get the medical card. How is that right? How is that legal? How is that fair?
Well, I mean, there's some states that have actually started to put in protections for workers that tell employers, hey, you can't test for marijuana anymore. California just did it. It went into effect January 1st. Oregon just upstairs theirs. But there's some other states, Connecticut's another one. But you'd be surprised of the states that don't have protections for their workers. Famously, Colorado's one of the first states to do recreational marijuana. They don't provide that protection to their workers. There was a news reporter who actually got fired for testing for marijuana, and the Colorado Supreme Court upheld it. So it's a state-by-state thing as far as protecting the workers, because it's still illegal federally.
Do you think that, like, part of the issue with marijuana, and I'm remembering this from my old criminal representation days, right? So marijuana stays in your system up to 30 days, right?
Depending on the test.
Depending on the test. It could, like, let's just say your traditional urinalysis test.
Right.
Could stay up, and because it gets in your fat cells, and depending on your metabolic rate and all this, there could be traces of marijuana as much as 30 days. If I went on a vacation and smoked weed.
You went to Colorado. You went skiing. You said, hey,
totally
I'm going to go to a dispensary. It's completely legal. You didn't break any laws doing it. You didn't do it while you were at work. In fact, you were on vacation.
Right.
And that's a lot of the argument for people is
2 weeks later.
I didn't break a single law.
Right.
And then you're busting me for something that, right, I wasn't even at work. Whereas usually when they do alcohol testing at work, it's such a short time for you to be over a limit that they actually can tell whether or not you were drunk at work.
Right. So the enforcement is interesting. And so how do you see that playing out, right? So let's say that same example, you went on a ski trip, you had legal marijuana in the mountains. 2 weeks later, you're in Louisiana, and you work for Halliburton. You're offshore. They do a random drug test, and you fail the drug test because you have trace amounts of marijuana in your system.
Well, that's a good example, too, because Halliburton, your oil field companies are the ones that are still testing for sure out there, because there's a lot of safety concerns. You don't want somebody high when you're dealing with heavy machinery. People can get killed. That's a serious thing. So for some companies, I understand why they want to test for it.
Yeah.
But, there's other companies out there. There's a bunch of the big tech companies, right? They don't, Meta, Microsoft, they stop testing for this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's say Chaz Roberts, let's say my law firm. If I want to test people for if they have marijuana in their system, and you can still make the argument that it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I say, look, I have a zero tolerance policy.
And you can in the state of Louisiana. You're completely allowed, because that's where we're at right now. We're a state-by-state jurisdiction, whether or not you are allowed to test for it. All the states that still say, hey, you can't test for it in any kind of pre-employment or random testing, still allow for you to fire somebody or demote them if they can be shown to have been high on the job.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Because Amazon stopped testing, but you got to imagine those truck drivers are probably going to still be tested because there's federal regulations around that. But maybe they're not testing all their warehouse workers, and that's there's a potential for some people getting hurt there. But
you're operating forklifts,
right?
You're operating, but then can you treat certain workers differently?
Well, that's part of it too, right? There's some argument it might be under the American with Disabilities Act of you're discriminating against me based on my disability. But we talked about that before. Companies can tell you can't use certain drugs on the job because they're not safe. So even though you may have some kind of disability, they can actually talk to you about which medications are allowed while you're on the job.
Yeah, I had a case one time where I represented this guy who was severely injured on a bike. He was riding his bike and a car collided with him. The police actually put him at fault and said that he made some type of maneuver and go in front of the car.
Right. He had some contributory negligence.
Well, we filed a lawsuit. The driver of the car actually appeared to be impaired, and they did, because there was severe bodily injury, they did a blood test.
Which actually can go back to up to 90 days in some cases.
And he had marijuana in his system, and it had the type of marijuana, and he exhibited some signs of impairment, right? And so even though the defense and the insurance company said, we don't think we did anything wrong, I was still going to make the argument that but for the impairment, he could have potentially stopped in time.
Correct.
Right? And how would a judge look at that? How would a jury look at that? Right? You are giving me something there because you are impaired. And by the way, it's illegal to drive impaired, isn't it?
Correct. It doesn't matter. I mean, even legally prescribed prescription drugs, go read on that bottle. Sometimes it tells you do not operate heavy machinery or drive, right?
Yeah.
If I'm prescribed to Oxycontin, it doesn't mean I get to go drive with it just because I have that prescription.
Right. And if you look at alcohol
has been legal for,
if you're 21 years old.
Other than there was a period of time where it's the one drug we actually have a constitutional amendment that banned it. But it's also the one amendment that we've repealed in our history of the United States. So there's actually two amendments that don't count because they cancel each other out.
And it's the prohibition of alcohol.
18th Amendment prohibited alcohol. Then we passed the 21st Amendment, which repealed that. But it was interesting because when it did that, it left the regulation of alcohol up to the states.
Yeah, wow.
So there's a reason why we don't have any real federal laws around alcohol. In fact, here in Louisiana, remember, it was 18 years old to drink for a very long time.
Right.
And the way they got us to change it was by withholding highway money.
Yeah.
Because the 21st Amendment didn't allow the federal government to regulate alcohol.
Well, we need that federal money.
Yeah. Yeah, our roads, man, were not good. We held out way too long.
They could throw some federal money our way right now.
Oh,
right?
yeah, send it down.
It's amazing when you cross from Louisiana to Texas and you see the quality of roads and the infrastructure, right? Now, part of that is
more tax money coming in,
more tax money coming in, bigger cities, more population, more denser population, but also we are literally in a swamp.
Oh, we have so many bridges, so roads cost so much more to build around here.
And they probably have a lot less shelf life than whenever you get into that rocky area.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Scott, you were talking about how alcohol is no longer federally regulated, right? But marijuana is still a controlled dangerous substance.
It's still Schedule 1, which Schedule 1 means it has no medicinal value, yet we have 37 states that have medical marijuana. So
what's the interplay between federal and states when it comes to marijuana?
So most of those laws federally that ban the sale or possession of marijuana still are in effect. What Congress has actually done since 2014, it's an interesting thing. It's a little bit of a law nerd, but there's an amendment that has been on every budget bill since 2014. We have to renew it every year. But all it says is the Justice Department cannot spend any money enforcing laws in states where there is medical marijuana. Now, recreational marijuana, the way this amendment works, the DEA could still go arrest a dispensary owner for recreational marijuana. So it's really interesting because it's really about the money being spent, not the repeal of the laws. There was a guy that actually got arrested before this amendment existed, owned a dispensary and was spending years in jail, and went to the court and said, hey, y'all can't hold me anymore because you can't spend money on me. He wasn't asking to get his conviction overturned. He just said, you got to let me out because you're spending money on me. You're not supposed to.
And how was that? How did that work out?
He got out.
Wow.
No, but the court actually said, hey, we agree. They can't spend money on you. They got to let you out. But the way this thing is set up, it's every year they got to renew it. So if next year the Congress decides to not renew this amendment through the spending bill, if you're still within that statute of limitations, the DEA could potentially come and arrest a bunch of people that are in these recreational states.
Yeah.
Or even in the medical states.
So it's really the laws are still on the books on the federal side, but they're really not enforcing it.
Well, they took away all their budget to enforce it, and if you have no money to enforce it, then you can't do anything about it.
Is that a executory function? Is that from the executive branch?
It's actually from the legislative branch because they are the ones that pass the budget.
Interesting.
The president presents his budget, and then the legislature actually gets to pick it apart and change it if they want to. That's the same thing happens here at the state level.
What do you think should happen? You think that they should just return all the rights to the particular state and let the states decide?
I mean, it's how we decided to do it with that other drug, alcohol. People forget it's a drug, but that is one of the other ones. And I mean, it makes sense to me. We already have a structure out there in place for how that should work.
Okay. And how another hot topic on when it comes to medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, is the interplay between that and gun ownership.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
You hear all the time, man, you can't own a gun if you have, a medical marijuana card. So there's people that won't, especially down here in South Louisiana, right? We got a lot of hunters. They want to go shoot those ducks and all that stuff, shoot some deer and worry about that little instant. So there's people that are on opioids and they stay on them because they don't want to give up their gun ownership. But if you've seen a lot in the news lately, there's been a lot of challenges to different gun laws. And there's actually somebody in Mississippi who went and challenged that because he was probably a good old boy hunter. And the Fifth Circuit agreed with him and said, yes, you can't restrict somebody's gun rights because of their medical marijuana status. But you can have laws that just like we said with driving, you can't have a gun when you're inebriated. But there are already laws like that for alcohol as well in some states. So
okay, so look, a common thing that I would see is somebody had a gun. Well, there's always been a law that said you cannot have a gun in the presence of controlled dangerous substances.
And that's exactly what the case was for the man in Mississippi.
Okay.
He got busted and he had
marijuana.
He had marijuana and guns in the car.
Yeah, it's the reasoning for the law, I guess the custom behind the law was that the presence of a gun next to drugs means that you're a drug dealer.
Correct.
Right. And so that they wanted to prevent that type of behavior. So
they really want to stop the people that are selling drugs and are using guns, right? That's more of a safety concern for the public than just the drugs being out there.
All right, so I'm assuming Louisiana still has no possession of a firearm in the presence of a controlled dangerous substance on the books.
It's maybe on the books, but it's potentially unconstitutional.
That's interesting. I've had a few of those cases in my career.
Yeah, there's a case going through Florida right now. That's the 11th Circuit, and it hadn't made it, but it maybe ended up in the same place as following the 5th Circuit. So, we could end up somewhere where the Supreme Court weighs in on this and really tells us whether or not you can do any kind of gun control laws around marijuana.
Okay, can we get our tinfoil hat? Because I have a question.
A
follow-up question.
You know me, I love those.
All right, so this question has been asked of me at least 5 to 10 times. It says, if I get a medical marijuana card, that is just a reason for the government to come and take my guns. Have you ever heard of this?
Oh, that's what people tell me all the time.
Okay, so it's not just me.
Oh, no, my good old boy hunters will ask me that all the time. And that's what I was saying is literally it just happened, but it was in the last couple of years that the man from Mississippi, at least for your clients here in Louisiana, they have a Fifth Circuit ruling that says you can't do that.
Yeah, and it's like you're going to be on some list, and they're going to come knock on everyone who has a list. They're going to knock on the door and come in there and take your guns.
You're probably on a list because you have to register with your state to be able to get that medical marijuana card. So you're on a list. Yeah. I don't know who they're sharing it with.
But I don't even. I mean, the list, just having a medical marijuana card doesn't even kill your privileges to have a concealed carry permit.
Well, it can't anymore because of those rulings. I mean, there were states that had, that, or the federal government could have enforced it. They really weren't. I mean, I know people with medical marijuana cards, and it's not like the DEA or the ATF showed up at their house and said, "Give me your guns back."
Yeah. Well, isn't this just like another example of like the work that lawyers do and like having clients that are on the other side of the law kind of pushing back on the government?
I mean, that's anytime you see these cases that come up, it was usually, as one of my favorite law professors, old Cheney Joseph, said, they're usually the bad guys when we're reading these case law, right? They weren't good people. That's why they got busted. But their rights are our rights.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to protect. That's what you do every day. That's what I try to do every day.
Yeah, it's interesting. Benny always says it's defending the rights of the guilty that protect the rights of the innocent.
100%.
Yeah, and then you see a scary guy and you're like, well, what are they talking about trying to protect this terrorist or whatever? And it's like, no, if there's not pushback there, there's nothing preventing them from going through your wife's panty drawer, right? And it's an extreme example on both sides, but it's true. It's like lawyers have to push back against the state.
Yeah, that's usually where it happens is, maybe the cops knew that is a bad dude and they were willing to do whatever it took to arrest that person.
Yeah. Well, look, shifting gears, I saw that, was it this week or last week, Biden just made some type of executive order that reclassified gig workers. Can you tell me about that? Maybe not reclassify, but change some of the
change
regulations.
the way you determine whether or not they're classified as a gig worker. And really, when we talk about gig worker, and I get that the gig economy is people can have more than one of these jobs, but it goes back to they're independent contractors. That's what our law provides for. You're either an employee or you're an independent contractor.
Yeah.
So that's where the Biden administration went and reclarified that rule.
Which is a huge workforce.
Oh,
right.
Oh my, especially in this day and age, right? It used to be not as much, but in the oil field you saw it some, and other places where these guys would work as independent contractors. But
I see it in the trucking industry all the time.
There's a lot of independent owners with trucks.
Yeah, I handle a lot of 18-wheeler cases or tractor-trailer cases, depending on what state, what you call it. But it's anytime we have some type of wreck or something, it's like, no, this guy was an independent contractor who worked for this company, who was this and was dispatched by this company, and they try to create levels of protection along the way, and they classify them as independent contractors, whereas, 10, 20, 30 years ago, a driver worked for a company.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's a logistics company or it was Walmart or it was Amazon wasn't around back then, but you get the point.
And these companies are smart. I mean, part of that is it separates some liability for themselves.
Yeah. And isn't it also cheaper, like when it comes to payroll taxes?
Well, that's the other side of it, right? So anytime I employ somebody, let's say I want to pay you $100,000 a year, there are some employment taxes that I have to match. Some of it's taken out of your check. I mean, a lot of people see that and see how much money's taken out of the check, but they don't realize that part of those taxes the employer is actually matching, so it costs them more. And then in cases where they want to give benefits and stuff like that, typically an employee versus an independent contractor will cost you about 30% more if you want to pay them the same amount.
30% more.
Correct.
Okay.
And then for the employee, a lot of times it's better to be an independent contractor because now a lot of their own expenses, because it's their business, they can actually write that off. Kind of like you understand that. But
if you have enough expenses, it justifies.
If you're the one driving, you could do your car, you could do your cell phone, a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. And so, but gig workers like today, well, it's getting more complicated because you got Uber drivers, Lyft drivers.
You'll have people with, I've seen the pictures, but like 5 phones in their car, and they got all the different apps running at the same time. So they're working for Uber and DoorDash and Lyft at the same time.
Without putting our audience to sleep, can you say what's the difference between an employee and a independent contractor
in
the
bigger scheme of things? And look, Biden did change the rule, but so people understand. It's not like this wild change to something new. It's actually kind of putting back where we were during the Obama administration. So Trump loosened the rules, and then the Democrats typically save your workers a little more. But the test is essentially how much of this was your main job versus a side job. So Chaz works all day long at Chaz Roberts Law Firm, 8 to 5, and just at night, hey, I need a little extra cash. So for an hour or two, I'm going to go get on the Uber app. You're probably going to be considered an independent contractor. because you have ability to go make money somewhere else. You have the ability to make a profit and loss somewhere else. But if your only job or all of your money's coming because you're just Ubering every day and you're killing it, you may be an employee because your livelihood depends on the money from Uber.
And I have an Uber on my car. I have an Uber shirt. I have an Uber cap.
Yep. All of that stuff counts too, right? Did they give you a uniform? Did they give you equipment and supplies versus you having to bring your own equipment? So that's also where the argument comes in for Uber, right? It's not, we don't own those cars. They brought that car.
Yeah.
And if that car breaks, they got to fix it. I don't fix it. So there's a chance for that person to actually lose money, or, hey, they got a car with bad gas mileage. They may not make money, and that's a big determinant of, are you an independent contractor or not? Or do you have the ability to lose money doing this?
Yeah. So those cases, I think Uber has been successful in defending whether they have an employee or independent contractor status thus far. And it's really, I think it's come up in the wages situation where they have to pay them overtime or
they were starting to have some issues with it. It was starting to come up a lot, and then Trump came into office, and so those issues went away for 4 years.
And you think they're going to come back?
Well, it's possible they come back, but we're also, in reality, we're in an election year, so depending on who wins, this new rule might only be around for a year.
Okay.
I mean, Biden didn't change this thing until January 1st of this year, so really we were dealing with 7 years of a different rule.
As a personal injury lawyer, I have a different kind of reason for taking notice of this.
Oh,
okay?
I know.
All right, so think about it. Scott, let me not use you because I don't want to put anything on that. I hope you're not going to drive for Uber or Lyft anytime soon.
No. Then
the law practice really took a nosedive, right? But so a driver from Uber or Lyft gets in a wreck, causes great injuries, severe injuries to multiple people, all right? There is insurance, but that insurance is going to be limited, okay? Usually it's $1 million of liability.
Now, and I know they got better at this because I've done Uber at times.
Yeah.
I've always been curious how those things work, so I go sign up and did it. But back in the day, they didn't check what kind of insurance you had. Well, and if you don't know, and I know you know this, but like something like Geico, if you're doing some kind of ride sharing, if you don't have a policy that has an amendment for that, they won't cover that wreck.
That's correct.
So now you're the personal injury attorney, and you got a person with zero insurance.
Well, with the way it's worked lately is that if the Uber driver is at fault, there's usually $1 million policy, liability policy.
Yeah, Uber's got one that's on the back end, right?
On the back end.
Oh, okay.
But there are exclusions of your personal policy if you're driving for Uber. Absolutely. You have to have an endorsement.
Right.
Okay. But what's $1 million if you hurt 4, 5, 6, 7 people, right?
You can,
severely.
You can get over $1 million on the case with one person.
With one person. Okay. So I'm saying, wait, Uber hired you. Uber put that sticker on your car. That person went on an app that said Uber, clicked on it, and you came along, and I'm assuming that Uber did some due diligence and looking.
Well, you got to imagine,
the
right?
Background.
There's very few people standing on the side of the road with their thumb out anymore, right? Because they don't want to get in that car. I don't know who that dude is.
I did not hitchhike.
Right.
And look, this is not just from the wrecks. There's been sexual assault cases, right?
Right.
There's been kidnappings.
There's been murders.
There's been murders. And so at what point does Uber's liability just cut off and say, oh, you're a contract worker, you're a gig worker?
And look, that's where that test too, it's about as clear as mud some days is what people tell me is I can't, and I spend a lot of time helping companies figure out and classify their workers correctly.
Yeah.
Because we talked about those taxes, they'll come back to the company later and say, you owe us a bunch of back taxes.
Yeah. Well, look, the downside is it'd be a lot more expensive to hail a ride across town.
It would.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way, about 30% more expensive.
It'd be 30% of billions of dollars is a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. Because it's not just Uber, it's Lyft, it's the food delivery, it's Walmart.
Well, I don't think food deliveries could get any more expensive.
Right.
All right. Well, I never, ever.
Don't put that out there. Come on.
No?
It can get more expensive. Don't put that out there.
I've never seen a $10 thing of sushi turn to $46.42 so damn fast. Like, I like to think that I could afford it. I am just morally opposed to it. not to mention, you never know the type of person that's going to show up and deliver your food.
I think I paid $15 for some burger and fries the other day. I'm like, well, what is going on?
Do you think how much?
$15.
Do you think that there have been instances where Uber Eats drivers have taken the bag of your burger and fries in the restroom with them at the right?
Bro, have you not seen the videos of people that get their food and it's been eaten off of?
Bro.
Which is bad enough if somebody like eats your fries. You know, Five Guys puts a whole bunch of extra fries, so you could probably get away with it. But, I mean, I've seen a video of somebody who got a pizza and pieces were missing.
Bro, I'm never, ever going to eat to-go food from Five Guys because you're absolutely right. Part of their business plan is they overstuff the fries and just leave them loose in the bag.
Right.
So the delivery driver could easily cop off 10 of them.
Yeah, I think they started doing that from the old days before we had food delivery so that Chaz, when he had to go pick up the burgers, could eat the fries before he got home, and Beth doesn't know that you ate her fries. So...
Man,
that's what it was.
I see a lot of places like they'll put like a tag on it, so if the
it's-
seal's broken,
Oh,
it's like a seal.
that's nice.
Yeah.
Tamper proof.
Tamper-proof. Yeah. My pet peeve is when I go to a restaurant and I am sitting in their establishment and they give a clear preference to delivery orders over the people who are actually there ordering.
So again, something I always like to find out how those things work. So I did some food delivery for a little while, and yeah, they have like this whole different section. You just walk in, grab your stuff, and leave. Versus somebody with a regular to-go order has to go find somebody, tell them their name.
Yeah.
You could just walk in and take stuff.
Right. Now, is that more profitable because they don't have to worry about like cleaning up after them and stuff like that? Or is there a hit? Isn't there a hit off of the food that you order and they have to give it a discount?
Yeah, they a lot of times they have to keep their menu prices the same, but some restaurants will jack it up to make up for it. But yeah, there's restaurants sometimes I've been to, I know some people that own some, and you walk in and it's dead.
Yeah.
And you go to that back and they are slammed.
Yeah.
But you see that, I mean,
some things are just better like to go than eating there, right?
You ever went to Starbucks and seen how many mobile orders are sitting on the counter?
Yeah.
Same thing. It's just how people are these days.
Bro, Starbucks is getting it left and right now.
Oh, man.
It's just not very good coffee, first of all. Like, and then they've rebrand, like just remodeled their insides and kind
Well,
of.
Starbucks is one of those companies that started testing for marijuana, so that might have something to do with the quality of the coffee you're getting.
That makes sense. They stopped testing?
They don't test for marijuana anymore as a company.
I would imagine it's hard to get people to work in that field, right?
That's a lot of it too. It's the labor force. Is you're 17% of people say they smoke marijuana now. 50% of people said they have smoked marijuana, but you got 50% of the population is in a recreational marijuana state.
Yeah.
75% of the U.S. population is in a medical marijuana state. So,
Yeah.
you got to be careful.
But I think that 95% of their potential workforce smokes marijuana.
Right. When you get to the lower income levels, it can be that way. I think you see people across all income levels now. But
Well, can we just say that like the restaurant industry in itself would fold if you took out marijuana out of this situation? Because I've known that is the most highly connected thing with the service industry, right?
Right.
I mean, you see them in the back smoking when you go past at any restaurant at night. You see the light.
well, another company that stopped testing, Chipotle, McDonald's,
Again,
In-N-Out Burger.
I mean,
You got to deal with the realities of the economic world in front of you. You hear all the time, you can't find good help anymore.
yeah,
Well, you need to sometimes change what your criteria is for workers.
right. Well, Scott, you're very good at podcasting. You have a podcast, don't you?
Yeah, me and some friends just get some mics and talk a bunch of stuff all the time, random things. Call it the right to remain offended. So but it's just us having good fun time about a bunch of things. So just like me and you talk, I got topics for days I could talk about.
All right. Well, let me try you out. I want to see how you do on that. Give me your top 3 king cakes in Acadiana.
I'm going to start with number 1 because I know you're not going to like it. You're going to
Okay.
give me some shit for it.
All right.
Meshes.
Meshes.
Meshes is a donut place for those people that don't know, too.
All right. For the record, I do love Meshes donuts, and I do love a Meshes king cake. However, the biggest knock and the biggest criticism is it's not a true, authentic king cake. It is a big donut.
All right.
which is tasty.
I think, it's delicious. I love donuts. Why it's my number one? Because I love donuts.
Yeah. So you're not an originalist and say, I'm going to be married to the traditional king cake. I'm just going to.
I don't mind them, but we'll get to that too. So my number 2 is Keller's.
Ooh.
Which for you, is that the traditional king cake?
I'm not from Lafayette originally.
Right.
So I was,
my family's from where you're from too.
yeah. So I was late to the game on Keller's, but to me, it tastes like a big honey bun.
Yeah, so I tell people sometimes Keller's and a lot of the other king cakes people like to go eat. You know, they always give me stuff about my big donut and it's not a king cake, and I tell them, like, you're just eating a cinnamon roll.
Yeah, it's a big cinnamon roll. So what I really like about Keller's is it melts in your mouth. I mean, it's really a delicate,
I like that it's not as big and bready as some of those other ones. That, for me personally, it's a little lighter on the stomach.
It's lighter, which means you can eat a whole king cake in a sitting.
Well, look, I love icing, so I can get more icing and less bread. I'm always down.
But the killer thing about Keller's, and don't be shy over there, Carter, is the inside the flavors.
Oh yeah,
the assortment of flavors is out of this world. What is it? It's an almond. It's the most expensive one, I know, of course, but it's I'll think of the filling.
Well, so you say that, and I'll tell you my number 3 is Poop Arts has a traditional French king cake. So when people want to give me stuff about my donut, I'm going to let them remind them, and you can go to Poop Arts because it's absolutely delicious. But the traditional French king cake, the first ones.
With the slices of almonds on it.
Because it has an almond filling, which is the thing you're talking about at Keller's. Okay. That's what the traditional king cake had, but it was a round puff pastry. It did not have a circle cut out in it. Wow. So that's something that came after too. And so Keller's isn't a traditional king cake.
Yeah, and Poop Arts is like a...
it's a real French bakery.
It's a real French bakery, so he's bringing the old French style tradition. Now, he has a newer style.
They have the Mardi Gras king cake, as they call it.
Which is... actually, like, not all that, fancy, but it tastes lovely. It's a nice, delicate pastry. It's good.
Right.
I just never go to the traditional side.
If you like that almond filling in that Keller's, man, that's what's in the traditional one.
It's like an amaretto filling or something.
It's so decadent.
But why are they so expensive now? Holy cow!
Because you're gonna buy them either way.
You're darn right.
It is supply and demand.
So in Louisiana, for people that are not from Louisiana, we have vendors that bring us things, and during king cake season, which is pretty much now, right?
You typically, I know, I see that in businesses. There's probably a king cake in the break room every week.
There is. When you worked at Acadian,
because the baby, right?
Yeah.
If you get the baby, you got to buy the next one. And it ended up it was like a weekly thing. Somebody was bringing in the king cake, and then somebody else had to bring it next week.
Yeah. So I think personal injury lawyers had prevented the baby from actually being in the cake for a long time.
Yeah, they did.
Because of a choking hazard.
Right.
But now the baby has returned to the king cake.
So they put it in the box, and they leave it up to you to put it in, so that Chaz has to sue the employee who put it in and not Keller's.
So the tradition is that the baby stands for baby Jesus.
Correct.
And so if the baby is in the king cake, if you get the baby, you are responsible for buying the next one.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, so for us, king cake season begins on the Epiphany.
Yeah, January 6th, although it was now a historic American day, but it's also the Feast of the Epiphany and the start of carnival season. Right. So that's when we...
So January 6th every year is when we start king cake season.
I don't know if it's January 6th every single year.
It
but
is. It is so many days after Christmas. And then that's weird because our Mardi Gras is based on the lunar calendar. So.
Wow. People everywhere have the holidays to get fat. In Louisiana, it's king cake season, crawfish season. It's game on.
Which is at the same time.
And
for people that don't know, Mardi Gras means Fat Tuesday. So the point is that whole season, the idea was do everything you want because you're about to go have Lent and have to give up stuff.
If you ever want to come to Louisiana, make sure you come during Mardi Gras season, crawfish season. You will have the time of your life. You will meet people like you've never met in your entire life, and it is great fun.
And if you come during Lent, they may be grumpy because they gave up something they really liked.
Yeah, exactly. Scott, thank you, man. I think we covered a bunch, dude. It's always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure, man. I love coming over here and chatting up the law with you.
And what's your handle, Guidry Group?
Guidry.group is the law firm we work with. And if you want to go listen to the podcast, it's r2ro.show.
hit up Scott for all your small business needs. He's a great resource for operating agreements, LLCs, contracts, the whole 9 yards. Scott will help you. He's very approachable, as you can see with his hoodie, and he's a good guy. All right. Thanks, man.
I'll appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, it would mean the world to me if you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a 5-star review. It helps keep the show free, and it helps us book better guests to provide more valuable content to you. None of the opinions expressed by my guests are that of my own, and nothing we talked about creates an attorney-client relationship or could be construed as legal advice. Hope you enjoy the show.
This podcast is powered by Acadiana Cast Network. Go to acadianacast.com for more South Louisiana sourced content.